The Bookshelf with Ryan Tubridy is brought to you by Eason, Ireland's favourite bookseller. Bookshops like Eason play a critical role in championing homegrown talent and putting great Irish books into the hands of readers. And this week, for Irish Book Week, Eason will be championing Irish authors and illustrators, publishers, and indeed Irish interest books across a range of exciting events and readings, displays, and much more. Check out their Instagram page at Eason_Ireland for more details. And I'll be doing my bit with this week's Ryan Recommends Choice, my weekly recommendation, where I'll discuss an Irish book that I've read recently that I think you'll really enjoy too. As ever, all the books we discuss on this episode of our podcast are available now in your local Eason store, or indeed order online from easons.com before 6 p.m. for same-day dispatch with free delivery when you spend over a tenner. Eason, be inspired. Welcome to The Bookshelf once again with me, Ryan Tubridy. Today we have a very special guest joining us. He's an actor of extraordinary talent and versatility. You'll know him from his extraordinary roles in Sideways, American Splendor, and the hit series Billions. He has earned countless awards and accolades across the film and television world, and most recently his first lead Oscar nomination for The Holdovers, which is a beautiful film. If you haven't seen it, please watch it. It came out earlier this year and late last year. We're going to explore our guest's life through three meaningful books: a cherished childhood book, a book that made him cry, and a book that changed his life. Paul Giamatti, welcome.
Thank you, sir.
What a pleasure to meet you.
Pleasure to meet you.
We got wind from an Irish acting friend of mine that you might be a bit of a talker and somebody who's interested in books. So when I heard that, I said, I'm a big fan, so I'm really chuffed you're here.
Yes, indeed. I do love books, and I do like to talk. So yeah, so hopefully this will all work out for
the
you.
Ideal guest. You can watch this show on YouTube, or you can listen to it wherever you are at the moment. But if you want to watch it, your headwear today is a thing of great beauty.
Thank you.
It's I don't know, you're ready for war here. Describe
I picked
it to us.
Randomly. I was walking around Los Angeles not too long ago, and it was very sunny, and I'm a balding man. I don't have the head of hair I used to have in my youth. And so I dipped into a little, there's all these tourist shops. I grabbed the first hat I saw, which happened to be this one. But I happen to be a big fan of Daffy Duck. I think that Daffy Duck is kind of a genius.
Okay, it's a canary yellow baseball cap with a kind of angry, because Daffy was always sort of angry about something.
Yes.
Stitched onto the front.
Yes.
Why so much respect for the duck?
Well, I have a lot of respect for those cartoons.
Yeah.
I think those cartoons are remarkable.
Looney Tunes.
And those Warner Brothers cartoons, Bugs Bunny, they were a big part of my life growing up as a kid, and I wanted to be an animator. And I loved Daffy Duck particularly because for some reason, that kind of frustrated outrage thing is really funny to me. I think I took a lot from Daffy Duck. I play a lot of frustrated, outraged people, and I think Daffy Duck might be my model, my idol, my hero.
Your mentor. Funny.
My mentor.
Who knew? I mean, I say the same about Kermit the Frog. We're deranged people just trying to make a book, right?
Exactly. Yes, indeed.
But isn't it lovely? But how appropriate for us to talk about Daffy Duck and childhood.
Yes.
Because that's where we're going to begin.
Yeah.
And I don't know what world you grew up in. I don't know about your folks or you as a young lad in your pajamas getting up and going. Do you go to the bookshop? Was it the library? I mean, I know there's teachers in your family and stuff like that, but I'd love to, Paul.
Everybody was teachers.
Tell me about
there were
them.
lots of teachers. My parents, my grandparents, both sets of my grandparents, my parents, and my father was a university professor. So I was raised with a lot of kind of an academic thing. And my mother was a high school English teacher.
Wow.
And so books were a big thing. There were just books around all the time. So sure, the library, the bookstore, whatever. There were books all over the place all the time.
Were you read to, or was it torch under the duvet stuff?
Both. I mean, once I could read on my own. It was torch under the duvet stuff, which I like.
Who read to you?
My mother, my father, both of them, as I remember. My sister did a lot of it too. I got a lot of my interest in the kinds of things that I like, I think in some ways from my sister, who had a kind of macabre, dark, funny imagination.
Oh, I like this already.
That stuff came from her, I think.
Tell me about your sister.
Well, she was a ballet dancer.
Oh.
And she was everybody. There's an artsy family too, so it's kind of artsy background.
And her name?
Elena, her name was. And she was very into kind of, we were just talking about the Twilight Zone.
Yeah, briefly before you came in.
Yeah, before
you came on air.
She loved that kind of thing. And so she was 3-4 years older than me. And she liked sort of scary things and creepy things. And I can remember her reading and giving me Ray Bradbury's stories, which are called, I think the collection's called The Halloween Tree, which were these kind of creepy stories and stuff like that. And all through my life, she gave me interesting, strange, weird, disturbing books to read that were very influential on me, I would say.
She was a ballet dancer.
She was a ballet dancer.
Who loved the Twilight Zone.
She did.
She's a remarkable woman.
She was a remarkable
She was. You're saying
she's no longer around, unfortunately.
Oh, I'm so sorry, Paul.
No, I thank you. Unfortunately, she's not. She was a remarkable person, though.
She had an
extraordinary imagination, and she stopped being a ballet dancer because that's a tough life. And it can end early for ballet dancers because,
the feet and the bones.
All of it, yeah. And she eventually went to a writing program and was writing and sort of did that for a while. But she was a bit of a perfectionist, so nothing ever sort of satisfied her enough.
Nothing was good enough.
Yeah. So, but she would write, and she was an amazing person.
Can I ask you what happened to her? Why how she died, or is that private?
She had a sudden sort of thing that happened.
I understand. Okay.
Yeah. So, but
and how are you?
Okay, it's sad because she was a very important figure in my life in this way, what we're talking about, exactly this way, and feeding my imagination with books. My sister did a lot of it.
Isn't it beautiful to bring her into the room here?
Yeah.
On the subject of reading, because she gave you a gift.
Yes.
She opened a huge gate in your brain,
for sure,
in your intellectual endeavor.
Yep.
God, what a remarkable contribution she made.
Amazing. And through our lives, we would read things and talk about them. Irish writer named John Banville.
Yeah, no, John, yeah.
Her favorite book was The Book of Evidence.
Well, about the MacArthur case.
Which is a great book.
A great book.
And in fact, I was just thinking about rereading because that was a big one that we shared. And she loved John Banville.
Well, John has a wicked sense of humor.
Yeah.
So that would make sense. And in Dunleary in Dublin by the sea, which I'm sure you've been.
Yeah.
The one line I always took from that book was, because I walk up and down, and then I read the Book of Evidence and I went, oh, he got it. There's boats and they're swaying in the water.
Yeah.
And he said there was the sound, the tinkle of an Oriental orchestra.
Amazing.
I said, he's got it. That's what it
He's
was.
got it.
So your sister
loved him.
had that sort of... She
loved
would have loved his crime books that he's done more recently.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I've never read any of those.
They're worth a go.
I bet.
Come on, I want to go back to young you.
Okay.
So was it comics and so forth and then on to books, or was it always little books? Or
I was never like that big a comic book kid.
Okay.
I went through a little bit of a phase of buying comic books, but I was not a huge comic book guy, no.
And yet the book
Tintin. I liked Tintin.
Oh, Tintin.
Tintin
I love
and
it.
Asterix.
Yeah,
I liked
great.
those a lot. Those were fantastic. Those were very big for me.
They were a comic strip almost, weren't they?
Yeah, and they were different somehow.
Yeah.
They weren't they weren't superhero stuff, and they were sort of adventure kind of things, which I liked that kind of thing a lot.
And manageable. And again, this thing keeps coming up as the books as portals, as escape. Did you need escape as a kid, or were you sound like you had a happy enough house?
I had an okay enough thing, but obviously I must have, but I think I was I think it was a household where you were being offered it a lot anyway.
Yeah.
My mother had wanted to be an actor. And so like I said, there was an artsy thing going on. So it was encouraged in a lot of ways. So letting your imagination go was not discouraged in any way.
How was school?
School was okay. I enjoyed school up until I was about high school. Then I didn't enjoy school after that particularly. But I went to a very nice kind of progressive hippie school when I was a younger kid. So that was nice because that had fostered all this kind of stuff.
But you've got me interested now about the high school. What happened with it?
It was high school, man, and I don't, I got.
If you can watch this, you're shifting your seat. I'm like, what's wrong?
I'm going to gird myself for this one. High school, I went to one of these American prep schools. I didn't board. There was a boarding school. I didn't board there. Those places, it's like I did this movie recently, The Holdovers.
Lovely. So it's a posh school, essentially.
It was a posh school, and it was one of those things. And those places were more like what it is in that movie. They were still stuck in this kind of older era, and they're an imitation of these kind of British boarding school.
It's Dead Poet Society, Holdovers, tradition.
Yeah.
You're a Barton man, this sort of thing. You're making a face as if to say it repels
I just think
you.
That's a lot of bullshit, that stuff. I don't like that stuff at all. And it was repressive feeling and oppressive, and it was just not a pleasant place.
Okay.
And the teachers their method of pedagogy was to be mean to kids, and so it was not a pleasant experience.
What a
I didn't
pity.
like it.
Because oftentimes I speak to people and there's one teacher who comes out of the crowd that goes, I recognize that. Paul, you'd be a great actor.
I think when I was a little bit, maybe just before then, I had a teacher named Mrs. Bishop. Who
you remember Mrs. Bishop well?
She was great. And she was fantastic and very encouraging of all of that stuff. There were good teachers in high school too. But I did a lot of, I had a lot of escape. There I started reading. My side reading became a kind of method of escape.
We'll go there in a moment. But keeping with the childhood, curiously, you didn't read the comic books, as it were, but you did have a bit of Tintin and Asterix going. Yeah. And the book you've chosen is also an illustrated book, isn't it?
Yes.
Tell us all about it, please.
Well, I see it sitting right here, and I haven't seen it in ages. I mean, it was definitely a book that was
pick it up and look at it and leaf through it,
I have not seen this in a long time. It was read to me. Now, do you know this guy? He wrote
Where the Wild Things Are. So tell who it is.
Is that famous?
Yes, it
the
is.
world over? Okay.
Tell us the author and the book that you're
The
leafing
book that
through.
I picked is called In the Night Kitchen by Maurice Sendak, who did write and illustrate Where the Wild Things Are. And this would have been read to me. My sister was really into this book.
Good.
Yeah, and this was one that my sister and we were very into. It's very weird. Did you look at it? Had you seen it before?
No, I hadn't seen it, but I was watching. I was reading. I knew the Wild Things, but when I was looking through this, I went, "This is not going to be a boring conversation."
It's a very strange book, and it's very dreamlike. Yeah. It's kind of slightly nightmarish. It's a little bit menacing and creepy.
What's it about?
But it's very funny. This kid has a dream. He ends up in this dreamy night kitchen with these three bizarre chefs who all for some reason look like Oliver Hardy. I don't know why, but that was really, really sparky to me. I was like, why the fuck do all these guys look like that comedian guy that I've seen? So that was really strange. He gets baked into a pie. It's very peculiar. He makes an airplane out of bread. He escapes from the night kitchen. He ends up in a gigantic bottle of milk. He's naked a lot of the time. It's fucking crazy. And these guys are menacing him. It's really a crazy book. And I still look at it and go, what the fuck? And even as a kid, I think I was like, wow, what the fuck is with this book? And it's a very peculiar book. And I look at it now and I see all this Freudian stuff in this book with milk and birth and all this stuff. I mean, it's really, I see all this stuff that I certainly didn't spark to when I was a kid. Although I did read this to my son.
Yes. How did that go?
Because I was sort of like, hey, this fucked me up. I'm going to fuck you up with this too.
It's your turn now,
Yeah,
kid.
it's your turn now. I'm going to twist your mind a little bit. It's a creepy book. And that too I liked about it. It's a little macabre. It's a great, they put the kid in an oven and they're cooking him in an oven and he escapes. It's fantastic. But the drawings are brilliant. Look at the drawings. And I liked to draw. So I think this was also when I was a kid.
Yeah.
So I think there's also a thing. I think I probably tried to draw things like this.
Yes.
I mean, it's an incredibly imaginative, weird book. I mean, look at how weird it is.
I wondered, was Maurice
Nobody would ever fucking write something like this now. That's the other thing. Nobody would dare write something that's fucking weird.
Well, they'd probably be in prison now
They
for
would be in prison.
6 different crimes.
Any number of things.
And not to mention possession of narcotic substances by the looks of... Clearly.
It had some kind of psychedelic substance.
Something was dropped somewhere in the making of this product.
Yes.
You know?
Yes. And that's very appealing to me still.
Look, if you think of Gene Wilder as Willy Wonka.
Yes.
In the movie.
Yes.
And Roald Dahl obviously wrote Charlie and the Chocolate Factory.
Also a big writer from my childhood, Roald Dahl. And
okay, we share this.
Love it.
Because Dahl knew that adults are a pain in the arse.
Yeah.
And children are patronized to within an inch of their life and get it much more than adults let them know.
Yes, and also kids have a fucked up view of things too.
Anyway.
Yeah, they'll see things and they'll see things that we don't think they see.
Yeah.
And they'll misinterpret them then and they'll sort of like, they live in a darker world than we may know.
And I think that's what he understood, that adults treat children like they're from a very foreign country and don't speak their language.
Yeah.
Or that they're hard of hearing. So that, do you like the tree?
Yeah.
Well, first of all, I can see it. Secondly,
It's
I speak
fine.
English.
And
Thirdly,
and third of all,
my
it's
hearing's
kind of weird looking too. It's kind of creepy and scary looking too.
like the arms of a human
Yeah, it's like the
dancing.
fucking trees in the Wizard of Oz and stuff like that.
Yes.
All of
And
that kind of stuff.
There's another
I
one,
loved.
right? Wizard of Oz.
All of that stuff I loved.
Love
That's
it.
all huge to me. The flying fucking monkeys.
Yes.
The like all of that kind of thing. It was a
The melting
everything
witch, the
for me in
green
childhood.
face, the
the
scarecrow.
All of it.
And you watch them as a kid.
Yes.
And because you're so impressionable, it becomes the norm. Of course,
Does.
the screen went from sepia to gold. Of course, the monkey flies. Of course,
Yes.
the scarecrow is singing If I Only Had a
Well,
Heart.
sure. And the Twilight Zone was something we
Twilight
watched
Zone.
too. And so all of it was sort of going in there, and I was going, well, yeah, this is obviously how things are too. It's the world is this strange and this kind of menacing and odd, but in a good way. This is something I was talking to your producer about, which is why do some people enjoy being scared by things and enjoy this menacing stuff? And I don't know why, but I did.
You got a kick out. You weren't
Definitely.
running away crying, saying, I don't understand it.
No.
But what a lovely mix that you can watch Daffy Duck and Bugs
Yeah.
Bunny and Elmer Fudd and whatever, and the innocence and darkness of those cartoons.
Yes.
They'd also probably be
They are
banned now.
dark. Yeah. Yes, they would.
You know, for whatever reasons. Then you've got Maurice Sendak and his books. What did all of this do to young Paul Giamatti? I mean, in terms of the influence on your...
It had a big influence on me, I think. I mean, and it's like, and all the sort of stuff, I loved to play act and things like that. I was always wanting to dress up in a costume and play a character.
Yes.
Just around the house, and a lot of it was influenced by, I'd wrap myself up in toilet paper and be the mummy or something like that.
Yeah.
I saw the terrible Gregory Peck Moby Dick movie, and I also had a picture book of Moby Dick, and I would dress up as Captain Ahab. I put a peg leg on and stuff like that. I mean, weird stuff, and kind of macabre stuff.
Were you doing
And
that?
I've always been
Sorry.
interested in stuff.
I love that. Were you doing all of that for attention, adulation, and comment, or were you just doing it for yourself to goof?
Both. I mean, I think I enjoyed just doing it for myself, and my brother and sister and I enjoyed doing it for each other. And then people would go, "Oh, that's funny, that's interesting," and I'd realize it could also be a way of, then the kind of performing for other people came kind of second to it a little bit. It came out of just that play between siblings and friends, and then it became this like, oh, I can do this in front of people, and they like it.
And they like it.
Yeah.
Can we nerd out for a second? And it's possible.
Like we haven't
I was
been?
going to say, let's keep it going. But were you a Star Trek kid?
Yes.
Okay, the classic
Yes.
series, obviously, Shatner. I know there's I think some really interesting news coming your way career-wise in a minute, but
Yes.
watching Star Trek, arguably a series that people go, oh no, it's just stupid. It's not. It's because I just finished a book about Captain Cook. And Captain Cook, and he had a pretty grisly ending. If you want to
he
know
did.
about Dark,
Yep.
I mean, I think they sent the rest of them in the post as to when
Yeah.
the ship left.
Yeah.
But he was he was heading around the islands or whatever. And so somebody made the point: Captain Kirk and the ship in the sky, Captain Cook and the
Absolutely.
seas going to lands.
Totally.
But in fairness to Star Trek, they had the prime directive, which is don't get involved. Whereas these guys went, hi there, here's
Yeah.
alcohol,
Yeah, give
here's
me- yeah,
herpes,
yeah.
and good luck with that.
Yeah, I'm going to take all your shit. Yeah, and basically, let me take over here and take all your shit. And so he got a spear in the back, as he should. He got,
Yeah, thanks
he got
for
it in
nothing.
the back. Yeah. No, clearly things had progressed, and Gene Roddenberry was
Gene
like, let's
Roddenberry.
make this
You
a
see,
little bit less.
There was an interracial kiss
Totally. All
between
of it.
Lieutenant Uhura and James Kirk.
Totally.
And there was all
But you
these.
have to said the whole idea that it's like we're going to go and connect with other cultures and not fuck with them, and like try to actually sort of bring everybody into this great sort of
great
galactic
message.
family. Yeah, it's a great message.
So you watched all of that.
I did, and that's my dad. My dad was really into, and he was ahead of the curve with a lot
Was
of
he?
pop culture stuff.
And he was a professor.
He was, but he watched that when it was originally.
love
on.
that he did that.
So when it was in syndication, he was like, "You'll like this. Watch this."
Wow.
And he loved all that kind of shit. He loved all like Kojak and stuff
Yeah.
like that, and all that cop show.
So
stuff.
he wasn't a snob.
But no, he wasn't, and he loved Monty Python way before anybody
so he
liked
liked
Monty Python.
yeah.
So that was another thing that went in the hopper and influenced me too. And so we would watch the TV show, and then we went and saw The Holy Grail was a big event in our lives, seeing that movie when I was 7.
Isn't that amazing? And The Life of Brian, of course, and all the rest of it. Yeah. So what we're getting here is lovely. It's a real offbeat.
Guess so.
But you know what? There's nothing mean about the stuff you're talking about. I think that whether it's Daffy Duck or whether it's even the Star Trek stuff,
no, that's true.
There's a kindness to it all, and even in the Twilight Zone, there were salutary tales.
No, they're moral. There's a very kind of moral thing to them. No, that's true. That's very true. I don't like unkind things and meanness. And
not surprised to hear that.
No, I don't like that kind of thing. I don't like people being mean to each other. I don't like a lot of the kind of internet culture of meanness and people attacking each other. I really don't like it.
It's cruel, and we won't even bother with it because then people get excited and then they get validated.
Well, that's why something like this is so nice.
But civil discourse, don't die.
Yeah.
Please. Here we are. Let's move to the book that made you cry. Because that's too happy. What are you a crier, Paul? Or
not a big one. It's hard to get me to cry.
Yeah.
But when I do, I go.
Waterworks.
Really, yeah. But it's
what makes you cry?
Oh, I think probably a lot of the, my son's events in my son's life, as I've followed through my son's life, have made me cry, and things around him will make me cry. And, I can cry sometimes in movies and plays and things, but not often. I'm deeply moved, but to get to the point of crying, it's got to be something that really gets in there, and so not everything does. Not everything does. You really got to earn it from me.
Okay, I appreciate that. No, I mean there's a premium on those tears.
Yeah, a little bit. I'm not a big sort of spontaneous crier.
Because in the Holdovers, when your character, there's a scene at the end. I don't want to spoil it in case anyone's seen it, but there's a scene at the end where he's leaving the principal's office, and if you know, you know, and you've been a tough nut, but I think we all knew it all along. There's probably something else in there, but we had to find it. Your face in that scene brought me to. I'm not going to say I was bawling crying because I'm a bit like that. But I had tears in my eye because there was a moistening. Real Irishman. I wasn't crying. It was a moistening of the ocular corner of my face.
One thinks of the Irish as being a culture where people cry or are willing to cry.
Sometimes it's a lot of oppression there, Paul.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah. Hundreds of years.
I get it.
But anyway, that scene where you're there on the screen and you do this face and you're looking at the young student and Mary, and I suppose what I'm trying to say is I just didn't feel you were acting. I just felt it was so beautiful. It's so authentic.
Good. That's nice to hear. Good. Yeah, good.
I don't know what I'm trying to say here necessarily. Forgive me for
it.
But
in my job, if I have to cry,
God, you're good at it.
Yeah. If you pay me to cry, I'll cry. But no, honestly, like in my work, I feel, when it's not necessarily that I'll do it more on my work, but you're given the opportunity to be in these situations of connecting with people in a funny way. And then I think it's one of the things people love about acting when they're actors is the connection and the opportunity to feel things and to connect.
If Cillian Murphy wasn't a neighbour of mine and an Irish man in Dublin, I would be pretty annoyed that you didn't win the Oscar you were nominated, but I'm sorry, Oppenheimer. You're great and all, but Paul, you were brilliant in that.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Okay, take
this.
this.
I tell you though, one of the best things about going through all that stuff that we just went through with the award stuff is getting to meet and know him. Because he's a lovely guy.
Yeah, he's a good egg.
Really nice.
I'm glad to hear that.
I loved him. He was a really nice
That's
guy.
so nice. And you've worked with another great Irish actor, Alan Leach from Downton Abbey.
The best.
You've been working out in London with him.
He's the best.
You get on well?
Love him.
Yeah.
He's so funny.
He's a funny guy. Good mimic too.
Crazy mimic.
Yeah.
And I keep saying, I say to him, people got to see this more.
Yeah.
You've got to do something where this is seen more.
There's more to come. There's more to come. Hey, we keep getting sidetracked, but I love that. The book that made you cry. So what did you alight upon for this?
It's an odd one, I suppose, but it genuinely made me cry.
Go on.
But there's a book by a gentleman named Nicholas Meyer called The 7% Solution. Do you know this? It's a Sherlock Holmes novel.
Oh, are we going to buzz on Sherlock as well?
Yes, we are.
This is
Because
gonna be...
Sherlock Holmes was huge for me too.
Why?
So
How?
that was huge for me. Well, it was part and parcel of all this kind of childish enthusiasm stuff. And I think, we say Tintin and that kind of adventure stuff and mystery and stuff like that. I loved shit like that.
Yeah.
So Sherlock Holmes, the first book I bought myself, I'd saved $10.
Go on.
And I went into a bookstore and I found a 1-volume edition of all the Sherlock Holmes stories, and it was $9. And I realized I could buy this for myself
And get everything.
and I had everything
And
in
$1
one
to
thing.
spare.
Yeah, and $1 to spare to go get myself a candy bar or something to get jacked up, so then I would read. And so,
Like Sherlock.
yeah, exactly. And in fact, 7% Solution, which I read several years later, which was a big deal when it was written because it was this kind of. It kind of almost created a genre in and of itself, which was kind of bringing historical figures into
Fan fiction.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's a version of fan fiction.
Exactly.
Anyway, sorry, go back to... We'll get to the book in a sec. So Sherlock brought
Sherlock Holmes was huge.
Baker Street.
I've been there.
You've been to the shop and all
I took
that?
my son there because
Did you?
he got into it. I forced a lot of this stuff on my son,
Yeah.
but fortunately he took to it. He liked it.
Well, then if it's not forced, it's shared.
Yes, thank you.
Everyone's
Thank
winning.
you, thank you. And so I took him there when he was a kid, and I loved it. I love the whole Sherlock Holmes thing. I mean, how can you not love?
Well, it's
Sherlock
a bit like Agatha Christie, where in after World War II, when everyone's nerves were gone, quite literally a lot of the times, and people were so scared about what was happening on the globe, and they knew that when they picked up Agatha Christie, crime started committed, mystery to solve, little Belgian fella, bit tubby comes in, fixes it up, the end. Certainty, 200 pages.
Certainty. Yep.
And Holmes,
safety, comfort.
Holmes,
absolutely. And it's interesting you say this because the last time I really kind of revisited it was after 9/11. I was in New York City. I saw the second plane hit. I watched I had a perfect. I had an unfortunate view.
Where were you?
Of the whole thing. I lived down in the Lower East Side of Manhattan, and where I lived, I had an unbroken view of those towers. And I lived in that frozen zone that got shut off and it was all closed off.
What did you think when you saw that happen?
It was insanity. I mean, I still can only tell you. My wife woke me up and said, there's a fire in the World Trade Center, because at that point nobody knew what was happening. And I said, what the fuck? And I could look out the window and I saw it, and I went up on the roof, and there were some other people up on the roof, and I saw another plane banking down around the end of the island and thought, oh, they're bringing in some kind of airplane, one of those planes that dumps water on forest fires. That's what I thought was happening. And then it disappeared behind the second tower, and I watched the whole thing happen, and it was completely surreal and insane. And so watched that whole thing transpire. And I lived on the Bowery, and there was just a stream of people covered in that white dust coming up all day up the Bowery, and it was the insanity of the whole thing was happening.
Did it affect you greatly?
Of course. I mean, it was insane and horrifying, and everything about it was just wretched and awful and bizarre. And it was a beautiful day too, which was so bizarre and horrible. And about a week afterwards, I picked up Sherlock Holmes to read, because I was like, I need the one man, who's the man in the world that will make me feel safe, and it's Sherlock Holmes. And so I read all of them. And I sped through all of them again. I hadn't read them since I was 12 or something.
And they gave you certainty,
comfort, safety, certainty.
Wow.
There's somebody in the world that can figure this shit out.
Yeah.
There's somebody who can give some sort of rational framework to the world so that we can feel safe and comfortable and sane. And Sherlock Holmes, those stories seem to have that about them. In general.
Wow, that's the power of books, isn't it? That could. People went to therapy. People went, to alcohol. You went to Sherlock Holmes.
I went to Sherlock
but what a blessing.
But it's true. It was a blessing, and it was something about that childhood connection to it too. I think there was the safety of knowing it was a bit of an escape and a retreat to a safe childhood world too. A kind of pre-adult world that I went back to.
Well,
as well.
that sets us up neatly then for this second book, the book that that made
7%
you
Solution.
cry. 7% Solution,
which was this very sort of, when it was written, was very popular. They made a movie out of it. This guy who wrote it, Nicholas Meyer, who I've become friends with subsequently, which is really great. Yeah. He's had and continues to have a long career in Hollywood. He's a screenwriter and a director. He's a wonderful guy. So he wrote this book about Holmes and meets, Holmes goes to Sigmund Freud, to get broken of his cocaine habit.
Great.
And it's got all this other stuff going on in it. And he goes through withdrawals from cocaine. And while he's in withdrawals, he has a kind of freak out on Watson. And he sort of, he unloads on Watson, and it's all this kind of unconscious shit about how he kind of, shit about Watson. And he gets through it. And when he's through the withdrawals, he sees Watson again, and Watson's stuck by his side through it. And he sees Watson, and he remembers that he said these horrible things to him. So and I'm going to get teary talking about this. And he apologizes to him and says, "I'm so sorry. You're the greatest friend I've ever had." And I started crying. I started crying as a 12-year-old because I was so moved by the idea of him showing his love to Watson. And it's not something you ever see in the stories. Yeah. But in this book, he kind of humanized Holmes a little bit more.
You weren't expecting that.
No.
That's what it is.
When I was a kid, I wept.
Yeah.
I wept as a kid.
Did you?
At this beautiful display of love between these guys and this friendship and all this stuff. And
unfettered by expectation and society. They were just
well, and all that Britishness goes
all
away.
that Britishness.
All that Britishness goes away, and they sort of bond in this very sort of lovely way.
It reminds me of that Ishiguro book, Remains of the Day. That love, and the film.
Totally.
And Anthony Hopkins in the film. And Emma Thompson. And he's saying to her, he can't bring himself to say, "Let's get a room."
Yes.
I mean, that's not what they would do in that time.
Yes.
But he says, "You're very important to this house."
Yes.
Not even to him.
Yeah.
And I that stay with me, but much
it
like
does. There's a powerful thing in that thing. I mean, what you're saying too about the character I played in the Holdovers is there's something really moving to me about somebody who's not entirely equipped and able to express their emotion.
Well, back to what I was saying to you,
and it's all the more powerful when they do, even a little bit.
Yes, but
it's like
in that scene you're talking about, that I'm talking about, where you're playing the teacher and you're screaming with your eyes, but you're not articulating it.
Yeah.
And when you read it articulated, which is different, as Shrek says, "Better out than in, Fiona."
You're right.
Do you know what I mean? He wasn't wrong.
No, I do know.
But if you keep it in, and yet, like you were in that film, and you're welling up because you're not willing or equipped.
You can't.
That's to use your words.
You
you're
don't
not,
know
you're
how.
Not, you're not
it's
built.
not even that he's not willing. He doesn't know how. And I think, even as I'm sitting here talking to you, I'm thinking about there's a lot of Italian men in my family. And while Italians are very emotional in some ways, there's, they also have a hard time too, especially the men.
Because
sometimes. It's the cultural thing. It's a kind of machismo.
Yeah.
It's a kind of like you're not
Italian
supposed
word,
to. You're not supposed to get like that. And so it's all the more meaningful when they did.
It's nearly worse being Irish because we talk a lot and we say nothing.
Well, I think there's a relationship between the Italians.
I think there might be.
Yeah, there's a lot of talk and there's a lot of bluster and it's all bullshit. And,
we need to grow up and say, "I love you, man."
Yeah, totally.
Just say it.
Yeah, and I think that's for some reason that really affected me as a kid.
Isn't that
and
amazing?
Still does. And still is something that I'm drawn to. It's interesting.
Yeah, the book that made you cry. I love that choice.
Yeah.
Because
well, it is. You guys asked me the question. And I thought, well, that's the only one I can think of where I literally had tears, wept tears. I've been moved very much by many books, but that one I actually cried.
We'll move towards the book that changed your life.
Mm-hmm.
I'm intrigued to know where we're going on this one, because tell us, Paul Giamatti, a little bit about what you read in between takes, or if you're back in your trailer or your dressing room. Do you have a book to hand all the time? I mean,
sometimes.
Are you a voracious enough reader that you
I
have?
am.
Who do you like? Who do you like to read?
It's a tricky thing because sometimes
fiction, nonfiction, or are you?
I'm generally more fiction than nonfiction. Yeah, I'm not and the genre stuff I particularly love too.
Yeah.
I love mysteries and science fiction and spy novels and stuff too. Good ones. sometimes it's influenced by what I'm doing. I might be reading something that somehow feels like it's related, and so sometimes directly, sometimes not. And sometimes it's tricky to have a book if it's too distracting, but sometimes it's good to have a distraction. So I'll never particularly know exactly what I'm doing.
Okay, so given whatever day
right
of the week.
now, I'm reading these Somerset Maugham stories called the Ashenden stories, which are spy stories.
Great.
And they're these spy stories. They're fantastic, and they're really escapist, but they're wonderfully written. And I don't know why I'm reading those, but I must have seen them in the bookstore and picked them up.
They're making you happy.
They're making me really happy.
The book that changed your life, you're going to bring us somewhere that, given that we've known each other 35 minutes, I actually am not surprised to hear this book. And I'm really excited to hear you talking about it. So give us the title, the author, and the reason.
The author is Philip K. Dick, and the book is Flow My Tears, the Policeman Said. And the thing I said to you when I was talking to your producer about it, I said the interesting thing with me is that all three of these books are before I'm 15 years old, and that the impact is lifelong, though, and that it's like I continue to come back to this guy and to these books. And so I don't know whether it's because I kept saying, well, I can't think of books through my life. These are the important books, and they all came in my childhood. You know what I mean? And that's,
of course. No, I think that is in itself fascinating, because most people will come in and, the second or third book after childhood can be
move on.
Big leap. But you were reading like Philip K. Dick.
I'm stuck in childhood.
Well,
a little bit I am.
It's a big book for childhood, because this is the guy that wrote what would become Blade Runner.
All kinds of things. Minority Report.
The Castle.
Man in the High
Castle.
Exactly.
What if the Nazis had won the war? Sort of stuff. So tell us about this book. Sorry,
he's a very dark, paranoid. I mean, he's a science fiction writer, and I read science fiction when I was a kid, but I didn't know a lot of other kids that read it. And I just discovered this on my own, and I think I was drawn to it by the title, which I thought was so strange. And I mean, I think at this point, 14, 15 years old, I'm getting interested in kind of drug culture and stuff like that, and crazy stuff like that. And that's sort of what, that's what very much his stuff is steeped in, a lot of the 60s and 70s kind of paranoid drug culture
of his time.
And stuff, like very much. But it's still really beyond relevant. I mean, I think we live in his world even more so.
So what's
now.
this one about?
Oh God, this is one about a guy who, and it's a Twilight Zone-y premise. It's a guy who wakes up in a shitty Fleabag hotel, and he goes, "Wait a minute, I thought I was actually this world famous talk show host. I had a talk show that was world famous all over the world, and I just woke up in the shitty, and nobody knows who I am." And it's very Twilight. It's very Twilight Zone-y in the way that it's like, wait a minute, my life isn't what I thought it was. Was my whole life a dream up until now? Wow. And I haven't read this one in a long time, but I think the basic premise of it is he's the product of somebody else's psychedelic trip. Somebody else is taking a drug that controls reality, and it's controlling his reality. And so I think that's the premise.
How did he? You talk about Minority Report.
Drugs. Drugs. I think he took a lot of drugs. I'm not going to lie.
Drugs.
Drugs. Gotcha. He took a lot of drugs, I think. And I think
but a lot of people took drugs and ended up in the gutter, right? So, or in a rehab. How did he apply? Well, he must have.
Well, he obviously was channeling it into his work. I think he already had a pretty wild imagination. Wow. He was a kind of beatniky bohemian guy who was already living on the sort of margins of American life. So he had this kind of perspective into it. He was on the outside. He was from a kind of working class background, and so he had this outside in view of things. But he was incredibly smart, and he was an intellectual, which was in America, a working class intellectual is a rare bird. It's not something you come across a whole lot, and so it's like he had an interesting perspective on the world. And so then I think he wanted to be more of a straight novelist, but he found he could make money writing this kind of pulp science fiction stuff. And then that stuff just started getting more and more deeper and deeper.
And prescient.
Very. I mean, we literally live, all this deep fake shit, AI stuff going on now, just par for the course in his books. And then everybody on weird fucking drugs all the time. All the kind of, the idea now too that people are using LSD for therapy, they're doing it in his books, and it's like, so, everything about him is scarily relevant.
So tell me about the life changing. It's a big thing to pick a book, and it's a hard thing to pick a book to say this changed my life.
Well, it was interesting too. And when they asked me that question, I was like, what does that mean? Changed my life? Yeah. Like, what does that mean exactly? And I suppose there's other things that have affected me, but this was a book that when I read it, it's hard to articulate. I read this book and I thought, right. This is right. What this guy is saying about the world, he's right. And I've known this, but I didn't know I knew it until he showed me that this is what it was. Yeah. So it was one of these things where, and he still is like that to me. I still go back to him and read him again. And every time I'm amazed at how right he is and how much it makes sense to me. His world, it's a weird thing to say. His view of the world makes sense to me, but it does.
Yes.
And there's something about the kind of strangeness of life, basically. He sees life as a kind of surreal, dreamlike venture, and I think I do in some ways.
Why is there... I'm trying to figure this out because and I'm not being smart, from Daffy Duck to The Twilight Zone. No, but these are all great things.
No, it's interesting.
They're all surreal. There's a childishness to it, but it's not either.
That's interesting.
There's a playfulness to it. There's a what-ifery about it.
Yeah.
There's a kindness to it as well, even in the commentary of it. It's not nasty or cruel or mean-spirited.
Yeah.
They're all drawn together.
No, this is therapeutic for me, man. No, and in a weird way, I hadn't ever thought of the connection of all this stuff. That it's interesting, the kind of connective, and you say Daffy Duck and Philip K. Dick, and somehow it makes sense to me.
Weirdly.
Yes, it does. And it's like a kind of surreal vision of things, and
yes,
a sort of like, not the most cheery view of the world. I mean, as we were saying, the Daffy Duck and all that stuff, they're pretty dark, actually, but they're funny too. And Philip K. Dick is funny too. There's a black humor to it and so I think to me, there's some way in which I see, this isn't it. Here we go. I mean, I was not raised with religion at all or anything. And I thought of myself as an atheist for a long time. And I think I saw and still do see a kind of cosmic joke in the world a little bit. That everything's a bit of a prank being played on us. That we're all being fucked with at some level by somebody somewhere. And that all of these things contribute to that. And Sherlock Holmes will solve that for us.
Yeah.
So
he was onto this.
Yeah, he's onto
it.
He's the guy who's going to fight against
He said, God is a stand-up comic. I'm going to have a word in his dressing room.
Yeah, exactly.
I've got this.
Well, yeah, or I'll step in and make sense out of this shit for you if you're not.
Because you're making a bags of it.
Yeah, you're kind of making... So, but I don't know that I could call myself an atheist anymore. And I think that chance and kind of randomness and a kind of strange cosmic humor and cosmic jokiness is still a way I see the world. And somehow I already saw it that way, and he affirmed it for me, Philip K.
You got it. I don't know why.
Does any of this make sense?
Yeah, it does, because I'm going to share a story with you about my father briefly, who was a psychiatrist before he died about 10 years ago.
Interesting.
And he sat on the couch one day when I was probably about 10 or 11, and on the TV...
He sat on the couch. He was on the couch, the psychiatrist.
He was on his own couch. This is meta.
Yes, it is.
And I'm going to talk about Zuckerberg. He was on the couch, and on the TV was cartoons. It was Saturday morning. I was a kid. And I sat on the chair and he was on the couch watching the cartoon. And the cartoon that came on, I'll never forget, it was Wile E. Coyote, right?
Yeah.
So we're now in the same gene pool. And I'm looking at this grown man, and that's an oxymoron often for some of us. But I'm looking at this adult, so-called, and he's looking at the meep, and thanks. And he's still going. It's etched in my mind. And he's still going. And I'm going, okay, my dad's watching it.
Yeah.
And slowly but surely, he's now laughing. Now it's belly. Now it's side splitting. Now he's bent over. Now I think he's going to have a heart attack and collapse laughing. He's going red. He can't stop laughing. He's gone off the cliff. He's looking left. He's looking right.
There you go. He looks
down
and he
falls. He's gone again. And he's going, and he's still at me. He's still at the Acme thing. And here's a kid going, why is this man now? I'm now an adult, so-called. I'm going, why was the psychiatrist?
Why is this so funny?
Laughing so hard at this exercise in futility. That may be A, life, or B, just a cartoon.
Compulsive futility of a fucking thing that cannot stop ever doing the same wrong thing over and over and over again, and there's no fucking escape from it. And there's something fucking hilarious about it and fucked up. And if I didn't have Daffy Duck up here, I'd have Wile E. Coyote.
Exactly.
Because those are amazing.
But they got it.
And they are. They're existential. They're like fucking, they're and and again, the Twilight Zone and all this shit. It's like
challenges perception and
the state
of the world.
But that thing of like futility utility. And what is it all for? What is the purpose to this fucking thing we're all stuck in?
And it took a coyote.
But that's really cool. That's fantastic.
It's good, isn't it?
I love that. And my dad was like that too. And then I think my dad loved that kind of pop culture stuff and saw that kind of thing in it too. He enjoyed looking at that kind of thing and going, this is great. There's something deeper in here than you would maybe necessarily know.
The current generation have SpongeBob, which is hilarious. Adventure Time, which is pure trip.
Yep. Super trippy.
Philip K. Dick would be writing for Adventure Time if he was alive. Yeah. Okay, so
which
cartoons,
is great that there's a lot of that kind of weird shit pervading the culture is great.
Completely.
Actually.
Yeah. Okay, we're drawing to with a heavy heart to a close, but the last question is about the autobiography you have yet to write, and you know this is one. Some people have written them already, but we're giving them a chance to have a second go anyway. And some people say I will never write one, but that's okay too. It's more just a chance to have a bit of fun with the book title that you would pick. So how are we on? How are you rather on this whole idea of an autobiography? Because you've had a very interesting life.
I guess I have. I don't know. I mean, I would say to think of writing one makes me feel old, and I think I'm not old. I can't possibly be old enough to write a memoir yet. You know what I mean? Okay. I don't have enough. I don't have enough to write a memoir.
All right.
I don't know that I ever would write one. Somebody did actually ask me to think about writing one, and I thought, I don't know. The acting stuff isn't that interesting to me. All right, this is a little bit. Just bear with me here.
I'm here.
I love cats. I'm a big cat lover. My girlfriend and I found a little black kitten, about 2 months old. We were shooting in the Canary Islands. I was shooting. She was with me. And we found the cat, and I love cats. Little black cat. And I said, we got to take this guy back to America. So we have, and he's there. And I've had many, many cats in my life. And I thought, he's great. We're going to take care of this little fucker, and he's going to have the best fucking life, because I found him in the fucking desert, this cat, and he's got the best life now, and I fucking love this cat. And I thought, he's going to live to be 20 years old, 25 years old, this cat.
Oh, no.
And then I thought, I'm 57. This fucking cat might outlive me. And I suddenly was like, holy fuck, that's a really weird thought. That's a morbid, macabre thought, but it's kind of an extraordinary thought. All this line of cats, and this might be the last cat. And I thought to myself, my first cat and my first memory from about 2 years old is of a black cat we had. And I'm bookended by these fucking black cats in my life. And I thought, why don't I write about my life through the lens of all these fucking cats that I've had? So many of them. And the different periods of my life, what was the cat like that I had?
Great
And then I thought, and I can talk about the cat, and then I can talk about everything that was happening. We had these amazing cats when my son was born. I had this crazy cat I found when I was in drama school. And I thought, there's all these cats. And I thought, and here I am with the last cat, so I'm going to call my autobiography The Last Cat. and I'm just going to start with that black cat and come up to this black cat, and I'll talk about my life through the lens of my cats. So
Paul, I love
Is that okay? Does that sound good?
But you know what? Do you know who'd love this? Your sister.
Yes. Thank you. Wow, dude. See, that's going to make me cry.
I'm not trying. I'm just telling you. You know it's true.
That's actually going to make me cry.
She'd get it. She'd love the humor of it. She'd love the arc of your life story from a young actor pulling through. To have seen her brother being Oscar nominated for that beautiful film that was so heartfelt. You're such a good, kind person.
That's exactly right. My sister would love it.
She'd love that.
Yeah.
I'll buy that book.
Thanks, man.
Let's come back and talk to us about your autobiography, The Last Cat by Paul Giamatti.
Thanks a lot.
I really enjoyed talking to you.
I did too, man. Thanks.
You mind yourself.
Yeah, thanks, man.
See you soon.
Thanks, man.
So here's this week's Ryan Recommends, brought to you by Eason, Ireland's favourite bookseller. We're going to go with The Women Behind the Door. It's by Roddy Doyle, one of my favourites. Now, you remember Paula Spencer when he wrote, The Woman Who Walked Into Doors. And that's a story about Paula in a horrible relationship, difficult family tale, told as well as always by Roddy. Now Paula's 66, so we're finding out how she is, where she is, and who she's with. The story has a twist in the tale. It's very well told and peppered with very typical Roddy Doyle humour in the middle of all the sadness. So it's a gripping, great read. So let's go with that for this week. And this book and all the books we discuss on the podcast, and indeed this episode of the podcast, are available now in your local Eason store. Or you can order them online from easons.com before 6 p.m. for same-day dispatch with free delivery when you spend over a tenner. Eason, be inspired.